I'm Christy,
And I'm Kathy.
and this is The Psychic
And the Skeptic. Welcome back to The Psychic and the Skeptic. And on this episode, we are opening our case files for Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in Yorktown, Texas, which is just about an hour and a half east-southeast of San Antonio, Texas. It is in DeWitt County, which is known for its Western Days Music Festival, and it has a rich history in 19th century trade, as well as the haunted Yorktown Memorial Hospital.
And on this investigation, Kathy and I were invited by API, our sister paranormal team, to come investigate this location with them. Of course, this is going to be an overnighter, so we packed our bags and we headed to Yorktown, Texas.
Now, for us, that was quite a drive coming from the Oklahoma City metro area.
Oh, yeah, it's probably 6.5, 7-hour drive with
At least
stops.
to San Antonio, but then we had to go east from there. So, yeah, it was quite a drive, maybe 8 hours without stops.
And I remember this investigation, we were originally going to bring our cots and sleep inside, but this building, it's not in the best state of repair.
Right. Yes.
So I remember we slept in our cars.
Yes, not because we were scared.
Right.
Really
Yeah.
didn't have the right conditions for sleeping in it. And
Security, too.
right. This town was pretty rural. I remember driving out there, passing several oil rigs, just a little quaint small town. Because it was so rural and with the growth of the population in that area, they needed a hospital built nearby because the closest hospital before Yorktown Memorial was built was in San Antonio.
Yeah, I can definitely understand the need for a hospital, but I remember when we went, we were also looking for a gas station.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
where can we get a drink and whatever, some food? But yeah, it was very rural. I remember that.
They started construction in 1950 and opened the doors in 1951. So this is during the Korean War. And
Mhm.
they originally had built it to dedicate it to the 49 men from Yorktown who lost their lives in World War I and World War II.
Wasn't it only a 20-bed hospital when it
Yeah,
first
pretty
came
small.
about?
I mean, for a rural area like that, too, they didn't need more than that. That seemed adequate for them. It
Right.
was established by the Felician sisters, so these are a form of Catholic nuns, and served as a medical center for the region of Yorktown and surrounding areas for several decades. The hospital had also featured a bronze tablet listing the names of those 49 men from Yorktown who lost their lives in World War I and World War II. But we had looked for that placard and it wasn't there in the lobby at the time. So at some point that was removed.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I feel like they should have kept that memorial
Right.
somehow, but maybe it was just well known in the town and maybe they needed more space in their lobby. The second floor of the building served as living quarters for the staff, which was mostly these Felician sisters, these nuns.
Didn't they also have one room, if I remember, that was for the Catholic priests?
Yes, the nuns were in a dormitory style living space with
Mhm.
roommates. And then in the very back, on the second story, they had separate living quarters for the priests. The first administrator of Yorktown Hospital was Sister Mary Monica, who was a registered nurse, and she arrived in October of 1950 as construction was well underway. And she was alongside of Sister Mary Redempta, who was also an RN. And together they began the huge task of equipping the hospital and getting things organized and hiring the initial staff. So by March of 1951, all of their additional Felician sisters and staff members had joined in, taking several roles within the hospital's operations. There was a registered nurse anesthetist who was also a Catholic nun. They had an obstetrical nurse for delivering babies. They had an office manager. They had an RN running their medical records. They had a medical technician, which we have a photo of her that we can also post. They had x-ray technicians, dietitian, and laundry supervisors, all as the Felician sisters, these Catholic nuns. This is where it really gets interesting because some of these original staff members, their photos are posted in some of the offices on the first floor just past the lobby.
Yeah, I remember seeing a lot of those photos, and that was pretty cool. Some of them you can tell have been warped, moisture and just things like that. But I remember we spent some considerable time checking out all the photos.
Right. The original medical staff included Dr. Leon W. Nowierski, Dr. John H. Barth, and Dr. A. Rittman. Now, Dr. Nowierski served the community for many years. He was a doctor and practicing well into his 90s. And at the time, that was the oldest medical license in the state of Texas. So for this little town, they had this one doctor who had been working for a long period of time. According to his obituary, he was born in October of 1891, graduated from Tulane University in Louisiana in 1917, and was also a veteran of World War I. He passed away in October of 1986 after a long illness. So, of course, Yorktown Hospital played a vital role in the region's healthcare, especially during the 1950s through the 1970s.
I remember with Dr. Leon, he was, I would say, a key figure for us upon this investigation, too. And we'll get more into that in just a little bit, but keep his name in mind.
So, as time went on, other hospitals in the area were built and they had more advanced facilities. And particularly the hospital in Cuero, Texas, nearby, started to be kind of competition for Yorktown Memorial. By the early 1980s, the hospital had only 2 doctors on staff at the time and operated roughly 1/3 the size of the Cuero Hospital. Despite efforts led by individuals such as Sister Roseanne to keep it open, the hospital ultimately closed in 1986, the same year as our Dr. Leon Nowierski's passing.
And that's so sad, only a 30-year span.
The legend of this hospital says that many deaths were there. And of course, if Dr. Nowierski had practiced for a long period of time, the number of deaths of patients under his care is going to be pretty large.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that played into the rumors about an abnormal number of people dying in this hospital. They say about 2,000 people had died during the time that this hospital was in operation. And the high patient death rate at Yorktown Hospital is attributed to poor standards of care. They had a high staff turnover rate and a limited capacity to handle some serious medical cases. It primarily functioned like an urgent care facility rather than a full-service hospital. Most of the hospital beds were for obstetrics and some minor surgeries. There were a lot of claims of malpractice and inadequate treatment during its operation. So it seems these doctors maybe were performing outside of their experience and in an attempt to try to do whatever they could, being so remote from other major facilities. It's almost like they were set up for failure.
Right.
So Dr. Nowierski was the primary surgeon for this facility.
Right. And I know that Dr. Nowierski was also accused of causing some of the deaths.
Right. And the times, 1950s and 1960s, medicine and the way interventions were performed were the best for the time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there was a lot of extreme efforts done to save certain people. And because of mistakes that we make in the past, we learn how to improve our care, which is why the interventions we do nowadays are so well developed.
Right. But you still have that clause that you always have to sign before any procedure or surgery, etc., that if something goes wrong, the doctor's not held liable and you can't sue them.
Or maybe it's more, most of that is informed consent that you need to sign, where you're at least aware of the potential risks to any particular procedure. But some of the rumors said that some of these deaths were pretty violent.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these stories are unverified. I looked back into newspapers thinking maybe there was some lawsuit that was published, or maybe there was more information on some of these deaths, but most of what I found in the Victoria Advocate, which is a local newspaper, were birth announcements. And we're talking the 1950s. There was a baby boom, so lots of births were occurring, but not so much about losses or even difficult births and deaths during labor and delivery. When we were visiting, we could see some of these areas, and there's a whole OR suite for deliveries. And at that time, some, if not most, women were put under general anesthesia for delivering babies. Not many of them were awake. We didn't necessarily have the technology for a spinal and let the mom be awake for the birth. But in those times, they were put completely under for any type of delivery. And that creates its own risks with anesthesia, and certain problems can come about.
Good Lord. I would say when it comes to any painful procedure, just knock my butt all the way out, please, because, yeah. So I'm sure the ladies back then appreciated that.
The area of Yorktown itself dates to around 1848 and was officially incorporated in 1871 by Captain John York and Charles Eckhart. One notable individual connected to the hospital was Marvin Edward Smith, who was a staff member originally from Oklahoma, who worked and passed away in the hospital at the age of 72. So I find that's interesting because anybody who has a deep connection to the area and helped form the town, worked at that hospital, and also died there, leaves that potential for maybe a spiritual connection after their passing, or
Sure.
potential for haunting the location. And with all of the years that Dr. Nowierski had spent working at this facility, he clearly may have some deep emotional connection. And if many people died under his care, whether he was careless or not, that could probably trap somebody in that location. We don't know if it deeply affected him at the losses.
Poor guy was probably always underneath a lot of stress, though. You know what I mean?
Right, and trying to keep the hospital going.
Oh, yeah. Being like the main doctor, I couldn't imagine the stress that he would have been under. I wouldn't have wanted that at all.
And he worked all the way up until his death, and he died the same year that the hospital closed. So he could have been a very integral part in keeping that hospital up and running.
I wonder if one of the reasons why they also closed it was because of his death. No more doctors, so...
They only had 2 practicing doctors, and maybe after he passed, the other one was like, we can't get anybody else on board. It's probably time to shut it down. After it closed, the structure was used as a drug rehab facility, and eventually the whole thing was decommissioned in 1992.
Well, that didn't last very long then, did it?
No. It's estimated that the structure has seen over 2,000 deaths in its history, so it has now been abandoned for about 34 years, but is privately owned and available for tours and investigations by reservation only, which is how we got into the facility.
We went in, of course, there's a fee for anybody that's interested in going in and investigating this location.
But
Most places will charge a fee.
Just know that it's not a very safe place to be investigating.
Correct.
There's broken glass. There's openings where animals can get in, and those, of course, are things that myself as the skeptic is very alert to. If you've got sounds at night, could it be an animal? But just keep in mind that animals can get in there.
I think it's got some mold smell or something.
Yeah, there's
to
probably
it.
some moldy areas just because of the humidity and the moisture of the climate in this area, and having some open windows, allowing some of that air to come in.
One of the reasons why we chose not to spend the night there was because of the old, maybe mold kind of smell.
And sleeping and breathing that in while you sleep. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Plus, on top of that, it's very dusty, and you have to be vigilant of what you may be allergic to or what you can handle.
And we investigated at the end of March in 2025, so not quite super hot, which is why we went at that time, knowing that we were going to be exposed to elements. So Texas in July is probably not a great time to be investigating.
Oh, yeah. Texas heat can be killer.
Even then, we still needed the air conditioning. It was still a little bit warm. Many people have investigated this facility, paranormal teams, paranormal enthusiasts, or parenthusiasts, as we like to call them, or amateur individuals who maybe rented out the place for a weekend. And so any search online is going to give you lots of different claims. And some of those experiences of what people have reported include seeing human figures, an apparition of a former doctor, which we can only suspect is perhaps Dr. Nowierski, a ghostly figure of a woman in a black dress, and a nun-like habit. So that is a common claim, seeing these nuns. reports of individual spirits tied to former patients or staff. And sometimes those are individuals that come from some folklore and some specific stories. Shadow figures are seen throughout the hallway and especially in the basement. And reportedly, they charge at people and just come right at you. That's creepy, right?
That is scary.
Right.
But I've had that happen.
And I think one of the claims that we had heard from the caretaker were that the nuns don't like people with tattoos and piercings, and they tend to be the ones who are picked on in particular. So there's some thought to intelligent and interactive spirit activity versus residual, like we've discussed in other episodes. Voices have been recorded having intelligent conversations. So these are our electronic voice phenomenon, or EVPs. Entities reportedly respond to what you're saying. Physical poltergeist type activity, objects being thrown by unseen forces. So with the building collapsing and falling apart in certain areas, maybe there's some mistaken identity going on there, and it's a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, don't you remember when we were in the chapel area? We had something fall from that one far wall, and
Right.
it caught us off guard at first. And then when we
Right.
went and looked, it was something that had fallen.
Yeah, we just heard that noise, and I think it was over by the confessionals.
Mhm.
But there's animals that are around that can knock things over, but visitors claim to have been scratched, pushed, slapped, or kicked. Physical attacks can be quite aggressive, and one account describes a visitor becoming so distressed that they suffered a seizure. So I think sometimes people maybe not experienced in these areas let the stories take hold of their emotions and put them into this kind of stress response. This can easily be explained medically.
Right.
Activity depends on how that investigator is treating the property. If you're provoking, or maybe because it's a church, a lot of people have ill intentions when they come in there and they're trying to bring in Ouija boards and things that are strongly considered sinful acts or demonic like activities that could really upset some spirits that are there and create some of these harsh encounters with spirit.
I also feel like there's other factors involved, like environmental factors, having things to do with maybe the time of the year, the temperature, the moon phases.
Right.
There's
All
a
going with
lot. Yeah.
residual. Right.
Yeah, a lot that can come into play here when it comes to activities. So, happening. So maybe you go on a night where it's more active due to certain environmental conditions, and then other times you go and it's not. Also, the energy of the people there,
Right.
I feel, is a key factor. So if you have more people who are spiritually inclined, like psychics or people who are real sensitive, I do believe that puts off that beacon and combines that energy in a sense, and I think you'll get more activity for sure. Lots of factors.
And the state of the people who are there as well. If you come in with any kind of substances on board,
Mm-hmm.
drugs, alcohol, it puts you more vulnerable to negative interaction. Like I said, provoking can cause that. Or even if your mental well-being isn't intact, that makes you more vulnerable to dark entities. Because some of the claims here mention hearing voices, whispers, echoes, and growling sounds in the chapel, especially when religious texts are read. Now, I believe we read some scripture while we were there and didn't have any kind of negative interaction.
And we played the music. Remember, we played
Right.
some Catholic, like quoting of scriptures, and there was music also as well.
Right.
And I think it's important to note to anybody out there who's listening, especially if you're new to investigating, never, ever go on an investigation if you have, let's say, a lot of personal problems going on, whereas your state of mind, maybe you're really depressed about a divorce, or you're depressed about losing a loved one, or anything like that. Do not go investigating. Because if there is an earthbound spirit in a location, or if there is, let's just say, one of the unknowns, they can attach, and you want to be really careful of that.
Yeah, you're vulnerable.
Exactly.
Your mental state is not quite intact to keep an
A shield up.
awareness of your own
Mhm.
personal safety and spiritual safety. And provoking, I think once a location is open for public investigation and reserving the facility to go in, you never know what one person from the next is going to do when they get there.
Right.
And so, as the open skeptic here and trusting in what you know, Christy, as someone who's sensitive, and how you have seen the effects of what people do in creating an opening spiritually for whatever to
Yeah.
come
They
in.
open these doorways and then they leave
Right.
them open and they don't close them.
There's no way to keep a place spiritually safe from people who have ill intentions or come in without realizing what they're doing to a location. So, what could have been a harmless connection from emotional attachment from people who worked and lived there and died there can turn into negative hauntings and negative type activity.
Absolutely. And so I will say, this is why I think it's very important also to be on guard and know the history of the location, find out, hey, what type of people or groups or whatever have come in, because they can. And we've come across spirits who have told us, hey, we were brought here because of the doorway that was open. So you have to be really cautious of that.
Right. And some of their claims online that we found were reports of glowing red eyes, shadow movement without a visible source, unexpected light anomalies or figures appearing and disappearing quickly. And so there's no electricity, especially in that back chapel area. I think we
Right.
had one power outlet that was working.
That was by the nurse's
And we
station
run
hall.
this big, long extension cord.
But then it didn't work. So we
Yeah,
had no electric.
it's not reliable. So you can't explain that with other things. But again, there's openings, there's broken glass, there's some doors that maybe aren't well secured that perhaps an animal could have come through. Pictures can catch that reflection and show it as a red glow, and maybe people are misinterpreting what that is. But all kinds of claims, dolls or objects moving, speaking on their own. We have a few that do that are paranormal,
Mhm.
or old toys that we'll bring to see if they act up in a location. But maybe that's what somebody brought with them and it malfunctioned a bit. So doors or objects can move independently. Cold spots, temperature drops, again, those things can be easily explained by the lack of proper closure of the facility and breezes coming through broken windows, things like that. But people definitely report feelings of being watched or followed, overwhelming fear or dread. And again, that can be knowing that this is a spooky, ooky place and you walk in, you're already expecting to be
Mhm.
scared, and that can heighten the experience for some.
Sure. A lot of people feel uneasy there too.
Right?
And there were certain parts of that I felt
Or
uneasy.
general heaviness. And I think I felt that too. And I tend to chalk that up as this is a creepy spot. We know about a story in this location, or we know about a claim here that's pretty dark. So you can feel those feelings.
I remember wanting to have my back up against a wall when we were doing the sit down monitoring that area right there by the nurse's station. And Tammy was the same way. Tammy's back's going against the wall.
What's interesting about that is you especially don't want to know what the claims are.
Right, and
Because
I
you want to
don't.
make sure that's not influencing how you feel when we're in a
Correct.
location. So it's interesting that you felt a little bit of that heaviness in certain areas without
yeah.
knowing what could have happened there. Now, I will say we're there because the place is reported haunted. So you're
Mhm.
already coming in thinking there's some stuff here. So you could say that, oh, yeah, you're still influenced. You just don't have the specifics of what's going on. But when it's specific to a certain area and you're fine in other areas, that's interesting to me as the skeptic. It's like you'd feel that way about the entire place if you were just influenced by the fact that you just know this place is haunted, right?
Right. I remember picking up on Dr. Leon and didn't even know that was a claim for him to be there. But some people might say on the skeptic side, oh, it's a hospital. You're going to have a doctor there as a ghost. Not necessarily. But I did pick up on him and some things. But is it active? Yeah, of course.
And on that whole picking up on a doctor thing, we've investigated other hospitals before, and most of the time you pick up on the patients who died there.
I can pick up on that. Yeah.
I would say it's rare
Even
that
some
you actually
staff.
pick up on staff. Once we were at a different hospital and there was a nurse that you picked up on, but rarely ever the doctors, I would say.
I don't think I've ever picked up on a doctor except for this location, like you're
particular-
saying, but
yeah.
I can, and I have picked up on staff.
And
but
it makes sense with the rumors about this doctor that you picked up on him.
Mhm.
And no spoiler alerts here.
It'll be coming up.
We're going to talk about that coming up in this episode. So there's some important context to consider, obviously, with the claims and the reports, like we were saying, environmental factors, psychological suggestion, and building conditions in history. But there are specific stories on particular ghosts.
So one of the most famous ones is the child spirit in the halls. Now, visitors claim a young girl spirit named Stacey roams this hospital, and she's often linked to the library and basement corridors. Investigators have reported hearing childlike footsteps and giggles, feeling small hands tug at their clothing, and seeing a small child-like shadow dart across the hallways.
Didn't Brooke say that she felt her clothing tugged really low, like her pant leg or something? I feel like she said something like that.
I think so. When we were by the nurse's station, I had someone tap my right leg, and it felt lower.
Lower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Almost like they were trying to push their way in.
Right. Was it Stacey or was it another child?
I don't know. I didn't see them. I just felt the touch. So something with Stacey, though, paranormal teams say that if you sit and you read a child's book out loud, specifically Pokey Little Puppy.
I remember that book. That was one of my favorites as a little girl. That was one of the little golden books. If you grew up in the 70s, you know exactly which one I'm talking about, or even the early 80s.
Man, you're an old fart. I'm just kidding. You know what? I think I remember it. Was that the little white and brown puppy?
Yes.
Okay. I'm an old fart too, because I remember that. The rumor, though, is that this type of little book was given to Stacey by Dr. Nowierski. Some also claim that a ball will roll back toward them when they ask, like playing ball with a child. So Stacey is supposed to be very playful and an intelligent spirit. Now, we also have the nun spirits. They're known as the enforcer of the rules. So, since this hospital was ran by Catholic nuns, it is said that many of their spirits still remain. They're described as very strict, territorial, and sometimes aggressive. So again, this kind of goes back to the thought of if you come in with a lot of piercings or tattoos, then, these nuns can target you.
Maybe they're trying to scratch them off or pull your earrings out of
Right?
your nose or eyebrow. This doesn't belong there.
Why are you wearing that? Come on. Now, they say that if visitors wear inappropriate clothing, like shorts or outfits that are revealing, they can be scratched or shoved. Sometimes they're forced out of rooms or even forced out of the hallways. Some believe these spirits are still enforcing these moral rules from when the hospital operated.
If they're lingering spirits that don't realize that they've passed, it's still present day from their time.
Mm-hmm.
That would make sense. Anytime I hear about claims like being forced out of rooms or hallways, it's not real specific about whether they were physically pushed or whether they just felt an unease and emotionally they didn't feel like they should be there and therefore they felt forced.
When I read this claim, I took this as being physically pushed.
Yeah.
You know?
It's very rare. More often I would feel somebody having a sense of dread and feeling like they should not be in that room.
And something funny is I've had people ask me in the past, can they touch you or can they hurt you? And I'm like, yes and no. But like I have been physically slapped and had a red handprint I was slapped on my left cheek actually. And I've had something like grab my foot and trip me. So can they cause physical harm? Yeah, but it's not like what Hollywood would make it out to be, like some ghost coming and causing your death. On to ghost number 3. TJ, he's known as the Restless Patient, and he's said to be a former patient who died there in the hospital. He's often seen near the operating rooms or emergency areas. When he's seen, they say they see a full-bodied apparition in a hospital gown. Then you can tell about sudden temperature drops when he's there and appears. Some believe that he is reliving the moment of his death, while others believe that he's out roaming about and he's trying to communicate with those that are there. Physical attacks, like being slapped or scratched, are also sometimes attributed to TJ. So it's not just all the nuns.
I wonder where they get the name TJ, if there was another psychic that came through.
Probably.
'Cause I wonder if it was just somebody else who came up with that.
No, I think because you did historical research on this place and you couldn't find anything. I do think it comes from psychics. Yeah.
I mean, there's probably deaths that occurred there that aren't going to be published in the newspaper. Most of the time it's birth announcements, and especially that was the case for this hospital. But like tragic deaths or anything that could be out of the usual would be in the newspaper.
Right. Well, if you stop and think about it, the Stone Lion Inn, some of the main ghosts, I picked up on Edward and Sarah and Elizabeth, and come to find out other teams that had been there, they're calling them the same things.
Yeah.
And the same has gone with some other locations. So the Flower Bluff Manor, right? With the Spirit James.
Yeah. Everybody just assumes that's who it is.
Yes.
And that's where I'm like, I don't know, I'm the skeptic on there. I don't know who the psychic was who came up with TJ.
Right.
Right. And it's not really connected to any names that we know from history.
Right.
Like the doctors or the staff that were there. So,
Right.
And clearly, the story is this was a former patient. So there's thousands of people who are patients there.
Yeah.
So my skeptic brain with these stories is always like, oh, okay. TJ, some like Cracker Jack box psychic who just read a book and now all of a sudden they're
Yeah,
sorry.
but look at it like this. If you're working with someone that you trust, let's say like you working with me,
Right.
and I come up with something and I'm like, nope, the spirit's name is Toodaloo or whatever. You would believe me. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So probably the same concept.
Right.
All right. Now, the basement ghost, right? And we did have some interesting things occur in the basement, and we'll talk about that. But this is known as the basement shadow figure. Now, the basement is considered the most dangerous and active area, and many describe a tall black shadow entity. Now, I disagree with it being the most dangerous and active area. But anyway, supposedly there's a shadow figure that charges toward visitors. Investigators have equipment malfunctions suddenly out of nowhere. Also, people experience intense feeling of panic or dread. Now, this basement entity is often described as more aggressive than any of the other spirits in the building.
So that's where that charging claim comes from.
Probably. Yeah.
Now, without any power to the building, that's where I scratch my head a little bit with this feeling of panic or dread. Because if there's electrical wiring that's not grounded well, you could have electromagnetic fields that can affect you and give you that sensation, that panic or dread feeling. So you can't rule that as the cause for those feelings. So
Right.
what else could be causing that? Again, I think that's psychology. You're in a spooky basement. Some people can bring on those feelings just with their own emotions.
Sure. But some people don't, and it's a true experience. Just saying. We also have what's known as voices in the dark, and these are EVP encounters or also disembodied voices. Now, the difference between a disembodied voice and an EVP is that with disembodied voices, you actually hear with your physical ears. So the human ear can hear between 20,000 and 200,000 hertz. So if you're hearing this voice, it's either below that 20,000 or above that 200,000. People say they hear things like, you want to play? Don't go in the bathroom. The killer is coming. Now, these voices are described as responsive, which suggests that they're more intelligent than a residual. When we were there, we did hear some of these voices. I think we heard disembodied and had the EVP too. Sometimes it was like a conversation down the hall. All right, next, we have this haunted doll phenomenon. Some investigators bring dolls into the hospital to use as like a trigger item. And visitors have reported that their dolls move on their own. Then they have the devices picking up voices seemingly coming from the doll. That's a little far-fetched for me. But anyway, the hospital itself has stories of objects appearing to speak or react without explanation. There's also phantom footsteps and an invisible presence. So one of the most consistent experiences with this is that people hear this movement when no one is near. Visitors who are walking alone, which I never ever condone or suggest on paranormal investigating for safety.
For two reasons. Number one is safety, but two, if you heard a disembodied voice, you need a witness that
Right.
also heard it with you.
Yeah, I was getting to that on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, where is your witness? Where is your backup?
Yeah.
But visitors say they feel footsteps following behind them, doors slamming in empty rooms, and I know that can be those
The
open
wind.
windows,
Yeah.
right? And then a strong feeling of being watched or like someone is following them. They describe these events as subtle at first, and then they just escalate. Now, there's also physical attacks and violent encounters. So some of the most disturbing reports involve these direct physical interactions. Witnesses say they've been scratched, pushed, slapped, or kicked, and that some of these leave visible marks on the body. There's also the red eyes and the watching presence. So visitors sometimes say they see glowing red eyes in dark hallways or rooms. And as Kathy mentioned earlier, could it be from an animal? It's kind of like a deer caught in headlights sort of thing. You shine your flashlight and it could catch the animal's eyes.
We did have some items out of place in the morning after we were sleeping. We went back in to get audio that we had set up for overnight.
Yeah, I remember Brooke and Tammy come running
Right.
to our car. And they're like, hey,
There's some
wake up,
things
wake
out
up.
of- yeah, we've got stuff all over the place, and turns out it was a raccoon.
Right? I was like, what? And then they come back, oh, never mind. But anyway, not all these entities are supposed to be human spirits, but those are the claims.
So our team arrived around 8:50 p.m. and did our usual little walkthrough around 9 o'clock. So that's where Brooke, Tammy, and you went through the property, seeing what you could pick up on, seeing if you had any sensations or any spirits that were already trying to connect with you.
Yeah, and comparing notes. We just walk through quietly and then afterwards get together and say, okay, this is what I got, what'd you get, sort of thing. And we mark it down so that way it's not like, oh, you said it first and I'm picking up off what you said, etc.
And I usually go along for your walkthroughs too, because I have the preliminary history already
Mhm.
done with some names. And so if you start saying what you're picking up on, I can right away tell if you're on track with what's happened there at that location. We bring our audio recorders and other handheld equipment, and we started on that first floor, moved up to the second floor, and just looked around. We also take that time to look to see where we could set up cameras. Those of us who know the claims can see if there are places we can put our cameras and get set up. So after bringing in all of our equipment, we discussed our plan in the lobby and then started distributing that equipment and setting them up in all the various areas that we wanted to work with.
And then I remember Jill had gone and placed a motion sensor music box in the stairwell because from what I remember, either she was feeling something or she saw something move. And so she wanted her to monitor that area. So she also had an audio recorder that she put in there
Yeah, and this
And-
was that front stairwell. So just as you're coming in the lobby.
by the front door. Yeah.
Right, yes. And
Mhm.
I think she had felt like she was being watched.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So anytime that happens to us, we'll either stay there and see if more happens, but this is during setup. So she's like, ooh, this could be an area. Let me go ahead and put something here.
Yeah, absolutely. She did. She recalibrated the music box to get it ready to go and then set her audio recorder down. And we didn't know this at the time until she went back and reviewed her audio. But she captured an EVP, and the EVP says, "Hi, Jill." So we'll go ahead and play that for you.
Actually,
See-
it just said hi, but we threw in the hi Jill for effect.
See if you guys also can hear this hi that Jill picked up.
Because I thought they were only getting just the really no.
So it's a little faint in there. I'm going to clip that section again and replay it for you in case you missed it.
Yes, that was me.
This place wasn't a place that just produced a ton of EVPs
Right.
or even sound, but moving right along. So we had all our equipment set up. We decided to go and get some dinner. So we took a little break to go eat. We always have what's known as the famous dinner pic that we placed on our Facebook page. So at this time, we're all out of the building.
But we leave audio running there in case things happen while we're gone.
Absolutely. So now, my audio recorder was in the front lobby, and it happened to catch this loud knock. And whether this was something falling, whether this was something paranormal, who knows?
It's hard to know, and nothing really appeared out of place when we returned.
Correct.
And we had several similar knocks in this location throughout the night, so we're still scratching our heads over these. Well, let's go ahead and play that and let you hear what it sounded like. And that is where we're going to leave you for part 1 of Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Stay tuned next week for EVPs and more from our investigation at this infamous haunted hospital. If you'd like to follow our paranormal investigation group, you can go to our website at www.okpri.com or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/okparanormal. So you can find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts, and thank you for listening.
Because the paranormal is the normal.
Not yet understood.